Burglary at a Banbridge bingo hall. Do you know either of these two men caught on camera? What about this man? Online sellers are still waiting for thousands of pounds for high-tech goods they sold him. Crime NI, tonight, 10:35 on BBC One Northern Ireland and iPlayer.
Yeah.
The BBC News at 10 o'clock now on BBC One Northern Ireland with Hugh Edwards and Kerry Thompson.
Yep.
Tonight at 10, 2 arrests are made following the hostage-taking in Texas by a man from Blackburn. Malik Faisal Akram was shot dead by police at the scene after a 10-hour standoff at a synagogue. In Manchester today, police arrested 2 teenagers, as friends of the attacker said he should never have been allowed to leave the UK.
If there was mental health issues, why did he go in the first place? Or there were people looking after him? Or why did he fly out?
In Texas, the rabbi, who was one of the 4 taken hostage, has been describing what happened.
I heard a click, and it could have been anything, and it turned out that it was his gun.
We'll have the latest on the FBI investigation in Texas and the corresponding police activity in Blackburn. Also tonight, Boris Johnson's former advisor Dominic Cummings says the Prime Minister was warned about that Downing Street party at the height of lockdown. The Culture Secretary freezes the BBC licence for 2 years. She claims it's to help household budgets and not a political attack on the corporation.
We simply could not justify putting extra pressure on the wallets of hard-working households.
And one of the great wartime mysteries: who betrayed the family of Anne Frank to the Nazis? A new investigation offers an answer.
And in Northern Ireland, the DUP deny claims proposal to bring back so-called double jobbing as a result of a deal with the Conservatives. And politicians unite at Stormont to remember murdered teacher Aisling Murphy.
Good evening. 2 days after the hostage-taking incident at a synagogue in Texas, 2 teenagers have been arrested today in Greater Manchester. The attacker was a British man, named as Malik Faisal Akram from Blackburn, who was shot dead by police at the scene after a 10-hour standoff. He'd taken 4 people hostage, including a rabbi, who all survived unharmed. Now, friends of Akram said that he'd suffered from mental health problems, and they expressed surprise that he'd been able to travel to the US. Greater Manchester Police said that the teenagers detained today, whose identities have not been revealed, are both being questioned as part of the ongoing investigation. Our special correspondent Ed Thomas has more details.
What made Malik Faisal Akram leave Blackburn, the place he called home, to travel to Texas, arm himself with a gun and hold people hostage inside a synagogue? There was a tense 10-hour standoff as an FBI SWAT team moved in. The 44-year-old spoke to his family back home. His words were recorded as he became increasingly desperate.
I'm going to die at this, all right? Are you listening? I am going to die.
These pictures show several hostages running for their lives. Within minutes, Malik Faisal Akram was shot dead. The rabbi here described their ordeal.
It didn't look good. It didn't sound good. We were terrified. And when I saw an opportunity where he wasn't in a good position, I made sure that the 2 gentlemen who were still with me, that they were ready to go. The exit wasn't too far away. I told them to go. I threw a chair at the gunman, and I headed for the door. And all 3 of us were able to get out without even a shot being fired.
Throughout the standoff, Malik Faisal Akram was heard demanding the release of Afia Siddiqui. She's known as Lady Al-Qaeda, a Pakistani neuroscientist jailed in the US for trying to kill American soldiers in Afghanistan.
It's the way that he was killed. He was shot. That shouldn't have happened.
Tariq Hussain knew Malik Faisal Akram and his family. He says many here question his mental state at the time he went to America.
It's very frustrating for the family. They're going through a very hard and difficult time, and our prayers are with them. I mean, if there was mental health issues, why did he go in the first place, you know? So people would have, or the people looking after him, or why did he fly out? You know, there's questions that are not being answered, you see.
This message was posted on Blackburn Muslim Community Facebook page, believed to be from Malik Faisal Akram's brother, and has since been taken down. He apologises and says, although my brother suffered from mental health issues, we were confident that he would not harm the hostages. And tonight, a second close family member of Faisal Malik Akram, who didn't want to be filmed, raised concerns over his state of mind. He said it was widely known in Blackburn that he was struggling with his mental health. The US president has described what happened here as an act of terror, while those who escaped said they felt lucky to be alive. And this is now a global investigation, but the centre of this remains very much here in Blackburn. Tonight, we understand Malik Faisal Akram's brother has been spoken to by British counter-terror officers. They're working alongside the FBI. Questions still to be answered include what exactly motivated him to go? How did he get into America? How did he get the gun? And was anyone else involved in this? Separately, in Manchester, around 30 miles away from here, 2 teenagers are continuing to be questioned in connection with what happened in Texas.
Ed, thanks very much for the update there. Ed Thomas, our special correspondent in Blackburn. Now, Boris Johnson's former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, now one of his leading critics, has said that he did warn the Prime Minister in person about a Downing Street drinks party in May of 2020 during the first lockdown. Last week, Mr Johnson said he believed he'd been attending a work event, and Downing Street said tonight it was untrue that the Prime Minister had been given a warning about the event in advance. Our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, has more details.
The Prime Minister needs friends. An early jog with the dog at the start of a week that could decide his future. Waiting for an official verdict over what gatherings were going on under his own roof during lockdown. Last week, there was an apology and an admission about one event.
I believed implicitly that this was a work event. But, Mr. Speaker, with hindsight, I should have sent everyone back inside.
The evening in the number 10 garden had been organised by one of his right-hand men, his private secretary Martin Reynolds here, who'd invited around 100 people. But a man who used to be by Boris Johnson's side has challenged the version of events. Writing online, Dominic Cummings says on the day of the event itself, amid many arguments, I said to the PM something like, Martin's invited the building to a drinks party. You've got to grip this madhouse. Going on to write, not only me, but other eyewitnesses who discussed this at the time would swear under oath this is what happened. Number 10, though, says it is untrue that the Prime Minister was warned about the event in advance. Remember, Mr Cummings doesn't hide his desire to see Boris Johnson gone. Chief advisor back then, perhaps now, enemy number 1. Yet 2 other former officials say they remember Mr Cummings telling them that day he'd warned the Prime Minister not to go ahead before the drinks gathering took place in the garden in any case. Number 10 firmly disputes this account. Yet tonight's spat will dim government hopes that the febrile atmosphere may have started to calm.
Do you have confidence in the Prime Minister?
There is widespread fear and sometimes loathing about the mess and the public's reaction. Yet there's a pause before the official report from civil servant Sue Gray emerges.
It's only right that we don't, condemn the Prime Minister, someone who's apologised to Parliament and said that he will come back when the Sue Gray investigation is finished. That is the fairest way of dealing with this.
It's impossible to know right now how many MPs really want Boris Johnson out, but many have heard anger from constituents when, not if, is a common refrain.
My constituents at the moment are about 60 to 1 against the Prime Minister, and I've listened very carefully to members of my association too. There are some very strident voices in my constituency demanding that I support the Prime Minister.
For many Conservatives, it's the style and character of this government that concerns, not the specifics of any parties. But acting to take out a leader is a drastic move. And it's not clear yet how many punches the Prime Minister can really withstand. Laura Kutzberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, Labour has accused the government of trying to regain popularity by punishing those who have been reporting the scandal of lockdown parties in Downing Street. The Culture Secretary, Nadine Dorries, one of Boris Johnson's strongest supporters in the Cabinet, has suggested that the BBC licence fee could be abolished in 2027 and has confirmed that the corporation's funding will be frozen for the next 2 years. Some media experts predict that the BBC will face the prospect of having to close some services and to make significant redundancies on top of those already seen in recent years. Our culture editor, Katie Russell, has more details.
The BBC is 100 this year, and so much has changed across radio, TV, and more recently online. In the digital age, the corporation is under increasing pressure. And today came the opposite of a birthday present. The £159 licence fee that funds nearly 3/4 of the BBC's budget will be frozen for 2 years.
The BBC wanted the fee to rise to over £180 by the end of this settlement. Instead, it will remain fixed at £159 until April 2024. That's more money in the pockets of pensioners, in the pockets of families who are struggling to make ends meet.
Labour says this government wants to destroy the BBC because it doesn't like its journalism.
Is the licence fee really at the heart of the cost of living crisis? Or is this really about their long-standing vendetta against the BBC? Now it's part of Operation Red Meat to save the Prime Minister from becoming dead meat.
The Culture Secretary had claimed yesterday in a headline-making tweet that this licence fee announcement would be the last. Today she appeared to row back, simply saying discussions on future funding must begin. Suggested replacements include a subscription service, perhaps with a government grant to fund less commercial programming, or even allowing the BBC to run adverts.
The biggest living thing.
Quality broadcasting doesn't come cheap. Freezing the licence fee for 2 years is a real terms annual cut of nearly £500 million by 2027, according to one media analyst, Enders. That's around the same as the BBC spent on all its radio output last year.
We're going to have to address how we do what we do differently, and there will have to be changes and consequences. If you diminish capital resources, there are going to be effects. Now, the BBC has already had 10 years of real reduction by about 30%.
Whatever the funding after 2027, cuts are inevitably coming as a result of this latest settlement.
If you don't watch it, why would you pay the licence fee? You should be able to have a TV in your house without paying it.
I'm happy to pay it. The BBC produces some great programmes.
Things have changed, obviously, with streaming services, but I think the BBC is one of the things that are out there that's still the same. They're still part of British culture.
Frozen from next year is good, really, isn't it? That's what we want. Yeah, that's what it would help our pensions.
The Culture Secretary has effectively kick-started a public debate on the future of the BBC, pitting those who say she wants to destroy a national treasure against those who argue that the licence fee model is outdated in a world of Netflix and Disney+. Today, though, she wouldn't commit to offering up any alternatives. And in the short term alone, hyperinflation in the likes of drama and sports programming means whatever the BBC decides to axe, difficult decisions lie ahead. Katie Razzle, BBC News.
There's an anxious wait for news from the Pacific islands of Tonga, where a volcano eruption has triggered a tsunami and covered the region in volcanic ash. The authorities have not officially asked for aid yet or confirmed any deaths, but the communications network is virtually destroyed and there's been very little contact with people there. The eruption happened underwater on Saturday, north of the main island of Tonga Tapu, where the majority of the population lives. The family of one British woman say that she died after being swept away by the huge waves. Our correspondent Rupert Wingfield-Hayes sent this report.
These pictures of the Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha volcano erupting are from last Friday. This is just a foretaste of what was to come a day later, an eruption many, many times larger. This is the volcano poking above the ocean surface last week. And today, it is completely gone. It's now been confirmed the huge eruption severed the main cable linking Tonga to the outside world. This morning, New Zealand dispatched aircraft to try and find out what is going on.
Some of those islands are reporting that they haven't had loss of life, but I would reiterate that is second-hand and it is early days.
This evening we learned this British woman, Angela Glover, was killed by the tsunami that hit the island on Saturday. She'd moved to Tonga in 2015 to open an animal shelter. She died trying to rescue her dogs.
The strange thing was the uglier the dog, the more she loved it. Her initial call to go to Tonga was to swim with whales, which she did. And beautiful girl. She's irreplaceable.
Offers from New Zealand and Australia to help Tonga are being complicated by the COVID pandemic. The island nation is currently COVID-free and it wants to stay that way.
They have had disasters during the pandemic previously from sort of cyclones and hurricanes, and what they did then was just airdrop supplies in, and there was no physical contact or interaction between, say, troops and the local forces.
A century ago, nearly 1 in 10 Tongans died in the 1918 flu pandemic. Any reluctance now to ask for help would not be without reason. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
The end of the pandemic is in sight for the UK, according to a senior envoy for the World Health Organization. David Nabarro told the BBC that there was light at the end of the tunnel, but there would still be some obstacles along the way. His comments came as the latest government figures showed another drop in cases, with almost 84,500 new infections reported in the latest 24-hour period, substantially lower than a week ago. It means the average number of new cases per day is now just over 100,000. More than 19,000 people are in hospital right now with COVID. Another 85 deaths were reported of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. This figure is usually lower on a Monday. And on average in the past week, there were 264 deaths every day. On vaccinations then, over 36.4 million people have had a booster jab. That's 63.4% of those aged 12 and over. Much more work is needed to protect all parts of the UK from the impact of climate change. A new government assessment of the risks concludes that even current levels of global warming will cost the country billions of pounds every year within a few decades. And the report warns that while the world aims to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, the evidence shows that rises of up to 4 degrees by the end of the century certainly can't be ruled out. Our climate editor, Justin Rowlatt, spells out the potential implications.
Remember Arwen? You can barely stand up. The monster storm that ripped down trees and pylons across much of the north of the UK in November. More than 200,000 homes were left without power.
And we've had to sleep with all the clothes on because it's been so cold in the bedrooms.
Be warned, the government says today, we can expect more extreme weather as our world continues to warm, and we aren't prepared.
We're already seeing more severe extreme weather of many types. This is having an impact, and we're not ready for the climate change that's already happening, let alone the climate change which is on the way.
UK temperatures won't necessarily rise in line with the global average. This is now. We sometimes get temperatures 2 degrees above average in the south of England. Now, if average global temperatures rise by 2 degrees, the increase would be more like 3 degrees. But we should also be prepared for this, says this latest assessment of the risks of climate change. It's unlikely, but if global temperatures were to rise by 4 degrees, maximum summer temperatures in the south could be as much as 7 degrees hotter, with the north up to 6 degrees hotter. The risks cut right across society, say ministers. Infrastructure, roads, sewage systems, power stations will struggle as storms, droughts, floods and heat waves become more frequent and more intense. Our health and productivity will suffer. Farms will struggle to produce as much food, and at the same time, the supply of goods from abroad is likely to be disrupted. To meet these challenges, the government needs to take action right away, say its independent advisors on climate change.
We really have got to start thinking about adaptation in everything we do. We've really got to start taking seriously the fact that our climate is changing, and we are going to see quite significant changes over the next 30 years.
The good news is that today's report finds investing in protecting the country from climate change is good value, with every pound delivering up to 10 times that in economic benefits. But we all need to begin to make these investments now if we're going to be ready for the coming storms. Justin Rowlatt, BBC News.
The government's been defeated in the House of Lords tonight over plans to give the police new powers to stop protests in England and Wales if they're thought to be too noisy. Peers voted by 261 votes to 166 to delete sections of the controversial policing bill. Peers from all sides of the House criticised the wording of the proposed curbs to the right to protest. In Northern Ireland, a vigil has been held at the Parliament Buildings in Stormont in memory of the murdered teacher Aisling Murphy. The 23-year-old was killed on the banks of the Grand Canal outside Tullamore last Wednesday. Thousands have attended vigils in different parts of the world in recent days, and the circumstances around Aisling's killing, late afternoon, in a quiet rural area, have renewed calls for more to be done to tackle violence towards women. Our correspondent Emma Vardy has the latest on this.
The sense of grief and shock over the murder of Aisling Murphy has travelled from this town in rural Ireland across the world. A talented musician playing here with her sister, Aisling was also an Irish speaker, and her career as a local primary school teacher in her hometown of Tullamore had only just begun.
She was the girl next door. She loved clothes, she loved socialising with her friends. We're struggling as a community, we're struggling to grasp it ourselves.
This was the canal path where Aisling Murphy went jogging after school. The Irish police say she was strangled and that she fought with the killer, who may have been injured when he fled the scene. They're waiting to question a man who's recovering in hospital with injuries that have raised suspicion. People have found this difficult to comprehend. What officers say was a random attack along this popular route in broad daylight. And what happened here to Aisling Murphy has sparked a reaction much further afield. In towns and cities across Ireland, in London and as far as Australia, tens of thousands of people have gathered in Aisling Murphy's memory. But more than that, to unite in calls for a change in society so women and girls can feel safe.
If we are to break the cycle of male violence against women, we need to develop an enforceable zero-tolerance approach towards misogyny and sexism. That's to end all violence against all women in all of its forms.
At Stormont in Northern Ireland today, the Deputy First Minister Michelle O'Neill called for a cultural shift. Ireland is still in disbelief, but there is also a sense of defiance and hope that Aisling Murphy's death can also bring about change. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Tullamore.
Britain is to provide Ukraine with further military assistance, including supplying short-range anti-tank missiles amid the continuing tensions between Ukraine and Russia. Around 100,000 Russian troops have been deployed at the border alongside Ukraine, and the UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace insisted that the weapons were purely for Ukraine's self-defence. Novak Djokovic has arrived in Serbia after being deported from Australia. He'd been hoping to defend his Australian Open tennis title, but was denied a visa because he'd not had a COVID vaccine. From Belgrade, our sports editor Dan Rowan has sent this report.
He'd hoped to return to his hometown as the first man to win 21 Grand Slams.
Is it good to be home?
Instead, a chastened Novak Djokovic landed at Belgrade Airport earlier, having been thrown out of Australia following a bruising legal defeat that ended 12 days of drama over his unvaccinated status. Reflecting his standing here, the world number one slipped out through the diplomatic exit, avoiding a small crowd of loyal fans furious about his deportation down under.
I think they should be all be ashamed of themselves, and I think that Novak will rise from this like a phoenix.
Honestly, feel very sad. I mean, to treat just not even Novak, any human, that way is just wrong.
After a build-up that threatened to boil over amid controversy over Djokovic's presence in Melbourne, the Australian Open at last began today without the reigning champion. Rafael Nadal, meanwhile, through to the second round, but the man he's level with on 20 Grand Slam titles still the big talking point.
Honestly, I wish him all the best. I think the situation has been a mess. In a personal level, yes, I would like to see him playing here. If it's fair or not that he's playing here, it's another discussion that I don't want to talk anymore about that.
One of just 3 men in the top 100 still unvaccinated, Djokovic risks being frozen out of Grand Slam tennis, likely to be barred from May's French Open after the government there tightened the rules over a COVID pass at sporting events. Something for him to ponder as he arrived home at his luxury apartment in Belgrade earlier. After a damaging saga that sparked a global debate about vaccination policy, Novak Djokovic is tonight trying to put this episode behind him here in a city where he enjoys unwavering support. But his stance means that his hope of becoming the most successful player in the history of the men's game remains uncertain. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Belgrade.
Now, this is a question that has plagued historians ever since the end of the Second World War. Who was it that betrayed the family